You are listening to MHTAW. It's me, your grandpa. Please visit more often. Now
Thank
I'm
you,
passing
Grandpa.
the mic to Mike.
Now I'm gonna get into my experience of learning Vietnamese with Duolingo. And first of all, I have not completed the whole tree yet. That's why this is called so far. I think with any language the best way to learn it is by speaking it. But in order to get started, you do have to learn some things, and Duolingo for me has been very good at that, because you learn things about grammar, although Duolingo does not teach you the grammar. Duolingo makes this game type of environment where you can remember words and you can remember grammar, you can remember basic sentences, and this helps because you are reading the grammar, you are studying it, and at least for me it's very easy to learn like one thing at a time when you speak about it with people. But the problem is, do you retain that information when you are already also trying to learn new words? So how do you do that with Duolingo? That is actually good because Duolingo combines. You have to form basic sentences. So while it doesn't really give you an in-depth look at the grammar, you do get your reminded of the grammar, because if you do make grammatical mistakes, Duolingo does very well notice them. So even if you know the words, you might do grammatical mistake, you fail, and then that reminds you, okay, that was what was going on. In Vietnamese there are these things called classes, for example con, kai, so on, which are like different types of objects and people belong to different classes grammatically, and these class words come before the actual word, and these class words are important for understanding what is going on, because many words are similar when the class word wouldn't exist. For example, for ke, and I'm pronouncing it badly, but ke, which is a chair, and hate, these words are separate but they belong to different classes. As do things like ka, which is fish, and then it's also very similar word ga is like chicken, and ka is also chair. So for example ka, the fish, hopefully I don't embarrass myself by mixing them because it's very easy to mix them, but kong ka is fish and kai ka is chair, because kong is for living things and then kai is for objects. And this is something that now it might sound kind of simple, but when you actually try to remember those and use those in the sentences that you use, there is a lot of need for repetition, and Duolingo is very good at making that much more fun, because otherwise, unless you are taking classes, which I actually don't recommend, like it's much better to get to know people and talk to them, where you get honest advice. Like you don't get a certain amount of hours, you just talk about that thing, but it gives you much more honest and in-depth and relevant information, because to be honest, I don't really value language teachers that much, especially when you are a grown-up, unless you want to get very much into the language. If you really want to get into it, then language teacher is valuable. But when you're just learning to speak so you can communicate with people, and you believe that you will learn more through communication, because for example, from my point of view, you learn the basic grammar, you start learning words, now you can start to communicate, and then you will start to learn words quickly, and at the same time you will continue doing things like Duolingo and studying the words. And actually, after you have a certain amount of like confidence with the grammar, meaning you use it in everyday life, you use it frequently, and if it's not possible for you to use it in everyday life, you use it all the time online, and you use it all the time when you write or when you record yourself speaking. Actually, think about Vietnamese and these languages where the pronunciation is very different, because for example you can have a horrible pronunciation of Spanish or French, but still you are much more likely to be close than with Vietnamese, because you know there are these sounds and other stuff. Like with French it's just like you will have a thick accent, but with Vietnamese they will not understand what you're saying unless you can really get into mimicking that speaking, and that is very difficult, at least for me. Like by far the most difficult thing is the pronunciation in a way that the people actually understand. grammar is not so difficult, vocabulary not so difficult. All these, of course it takes work, you have to study it, you have to keep it going, and Duolingo is good with that. But the biggest challenge is the pronunciation, and this is where there's some negative about Duolingo, which is that the synthesis that they use, I think it's a synthesis, I hope it's not a real guy. The pronunciation is not that amazing, like it's quite unclear. Like if you try to mimic that, it won't help you that much, but it's better than nothing, because most programs they will have nothing. And then there are some recorded by people making this. These are of varying audio quality, but these are much better because it's real people pronouncing them. And of course this is with the Hanoi dialect, with the northern dialect, which is also called by some people the standard Vietnamese. And in Vietnamese, the main differences are not in writing, they are in the pronunciation. So actually this kind of like pronunciation neutral approach might be good if you are already in the center, south, north, or and because in that case, if you learn the Hanoi accent, people will understand you, but it's just like when you start talking with people, like you will have a very messed up accent, because you will mix the south and the north, and actually that might be very funny. So I don't know if that is a bad thing, especially if you will pursue a career as a comedian. That might actually be a benefit, because it's hard to develop that kind of peculiar accent. But for people understanding you, you have to learn the accent of the area where you are in. Especially if you are in a smaller town or you wish to go to a smaller town. So for that, Duolingo is quite good, like, because some people criticize it's way too much the northern accent, but to me, like, nah, and like you just learn from that, and then you will just adapt it to south or the central. And if you already know a lot of the southern or the central accent, this is not very difficult. There will be some differences, but if you actually understand in spoken word, because I know many people, they can speak Vietnamese, like they can have discussions and a lot of stuff, but then the spelling is, all hell. Not to be cussing, but that's the only way to describe it. But for those people, and I know those people are actually a big market for this, and then another big market is the young people who are of Vietnamese origins, who are like half Vietnamese or completely Vietnamese, but who grow up in the West, and their Vietnamese is kind of a mess. Like for them, I understand, I've heard from some of them very critical things about this, both online and in person. And I understand it, because the thing is that for them they have very different goals, because they already know like the daily life communication. So for them all of this is kind of awkward, because the thing is that the language you learn from this Duolingo is kind of awkward, because excuse me, I will not edit that out because I don't edit my stuff. I mean, like, I don't mean somebody edits for me, I mean nobody edits. Not these videos. But anyway, so these young people, they already know a lot of the communication, so this kind of language seems kind of awkward, because they use the words that they are used to in a quite different way. And even like using, like in this you learn how to use like pan as in you and toy as in me, I, but actually in real life a lot of people, they use the an and m situation, which is like depending on the age of you and the other person. So I think you learn to speak about people, like an a, ko a, and people that you name. For example, well, in Duolingo they use examples like di an, like aunt di. But anyway, in case if you don't understand what I'm trying to say, in simplicity what I'm saying is, when you talk about a third person who is not in the conversation, this Vietnamese that you learn is very good, and it is quite accurate. And of course you have to be a little bit careful when you talk about people who are not there, when you want to be respectful. But if you are a foreigner, in that case they will understand that you are trying to be polite, especially if you add the polite words. You are just like trying to describe what is going on. But when you speak directly to people, in that case, it is a little bit awkward to use these words like toy and pan all the time with all the people, because like with different people you use different words depending on age, status, so on, and depending on the relationship that you have. And for that reason, the people who already know Vietnamese, the people who are or who have some level of Vietnamese, who have been raised in the West, for them this is quite awkward because nobody and they don't speak like that to when you are speaking one-on-one. So learning that is kinda distant, and actually, according to many Vietnamese people that I've heard, the Vietnamese that you speak, if you learn how to pronounce it correctly in Duolingo, it sounds quite theatrical, and this is quite typical because also the Finnish on Duolingo, it also sounds to me like quite simplistic and theatrical and quite childish, and this Vietnamese is the same. And actually the funny thing is that in the beginning you will learn a lot of words. You will learn words like kindergarten, you will learn different words for little children and stuff like this, which is kind of like what kind of tourists are they teaching with this? Like, of course those are very useful words, but it's just like, I understand for some people it's a major turn off in this subject, because to them these not just relevant words. And then there is words like, very quickly you will get restaurant words about, like, some of them are more useful about daily food, but a lot of it is like how you order. It doesn't go very in depth, but it's just how you order, the word for menu, even though people actually mostly use menu as far as I understand. And those are very useful words, but the thing is, if you are not somebody who is a tourist, if you are not somebody who is gonna be like impressing people at the local Vietnamese restaurant, if you are not those guys, those words seem like quite useless. But the thing is, you have to start from somewhere. Right now we don't have an app that you can just choose like fluently, that it can generate, and you can just fluently choose like, I'm interested in this and this, but not this and this, and little bit less this and this. So you have to speak some subjects, and in all the languages in Duolingo that you try, you will learn mostly about like kids, like describing people, the basic things, because this is also what they learn at school. So it's like the same kind of direction, and it teaches you some grammatical things. And also with Vietnamese they kind of go with rhyming, because they try to make it easier, but and also make you learn the accents by putting the words like ka, like in the same sentences and stuff, which are sometimes quite funny. And it's true that some sentences are quite useless in itself, but like it has a point. You learn the word, you learn the grammar, and I haven't met a lot of crazy sentences actually. There are some people who post crazy sentences, but I think those are for older versions, because like from what I've been using right now, there is not a lot of crazy sentences. So overall, I think this is a very good app for exactly what I said before, which is good for retaining the grammar that you learn, and it is good for expanding your vocabulary when you are starting. But the pronunciations you have to do for yourself. And then another thing that I forgot to mention, there are lessons. When you use desktop, there are really nice lessons. There are just sharp explanations of the grammatical things, and they are as good as any book, you know. They don't go as in depth, but like with those you can just go. Like if you're using the Duolingo desktop app, on the desktop, you can just learn. You can just get to a very nice level with this, I believe. Like the problems are gonna come with the awkward like phrasing of how you speak one-on-one, but those are the things that you have to learn it in person anyway. In any language, actual fluent communication one-on-one, you have to learn it by communicating one-on-one. And why I'm emphasizing one-on-one is because in Vietnamese it matters. Like, are you talking to a group of people, or are you talking to just one? And in many languages it's like this. So learning that and learning how to speak to different types of people in different contexts, you know, that will take time, but that takes time with any process. And I just think like without Duolingo it would be very difficult to get started without having somebody tutoring you all the time, and you have to, you know, annoy them all the time. And also, pro tip, you should get multiple people, some that you know personally and some from online, so you can ask like different people. So you don't have to annoy the one guy or girl. Instead, you can ask different people about different language subjects, so they don't get so bored, you know. So you don't just bother the one guy or the one girl all the time, and you don't go to the one restaurant that they're like, hell nah. When this guy shows up, don't do that. let the man be. Actually, doing that is much more fruitful when you're already at a level where you can have some sort of discussion. And actually, like the speaking, if you are learning to speak in a Western country, what you should do is that you should practice speaking online with people from Vietnam who want to practice speaking English. If your English is good, or if they want to speak to your language, whatever it might be. If it's a major language, they might, and even if it's a small language, they might want to learn it. And also, in most Western countries, there are Vietnamese communities, so you might find people who want to learn the local language, who don't know the local language yet, or, it's not a very high level. So you can teach that to them. And I don't mean teach, like just be a talking partner and just have the patience to like correct the sentences. So you can do that, and then in return they can help you with this. I suggest that much more than, Laos, who is a funny guy. But if you do that, that's not the best way to learn unless you are really at a higher level, because you will just annoy the heck out of a lot of people. But anyway, thank you for listening. And if you listen this far, you must subscribe and like, even though I cover a variety of subjects on the channel, but I will be updating on this for sure. Check the playlist that I have this on, so it's nice. Thank you, and see you guys.